Welcome, everybody. My name is Marty Mascari. I am a contractor under the North Central Texas Area Agency on Aging and the North Central Texas Aging and Disability Resource Center, or ADRC, both of which are under the umbrella of the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. And we serve a 14 county area around the Dallas and Tarrant County areas. But before we get started this morning, we're thrilled to have one of the partners, founding partners of Heyman Hogue. Fred Heyman is here to talk to us about why it's essential to have your ice pack in case of emergency ready. But before we do that, we're going to talk about CEUs just a little bit. If we could advance the slide one when you, there we go. And boy, that's hard to see. Okay, so I should know it by now. So, boys, basically, we are offering complimentary CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas, and we're also offering certificates of attendance. Um, if you have a different license in Texas or a license outside of Texas, you're more than welcome to go through the process, get a certificate, and submit it to your jurisdiction. And I have had people tell me they've been able to use them, but please know there's no guarantee. I actually have had jurisdictions reach out to me for more information on a presentation that we've done just to decide whether it qualifies under their parameters. So sometimes they do check. So please feel free to do that, but no, there's no guarantee. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 hours of CEU credits. In order to qualify, you must have participated in the entire live webinar and the Q&A that follows up to the end time, which is 11:30. I understand you all have other commitments, and that's what we've advertised this as. Every once in a while, we have a lot of questions, or I shouldn't say every once in a while. Most of the time, we have lots of questions, and we go over that time if of course Fred has time to do that. But you're only required to stay on until the 11:30 cutoff time. You must also complete a Google evaluation survey. The Google evaluation survey should pop up when you close out of Zoom today. It should ask you if you'd like to take a short survey, and that will take you to our survey. But if not, there'll be a follow-up email that goes out tomorrow that will also have a link to the follow-up survey. Please add for some reason, last week, Google changed their whole forms setup, and so it's quite a bit different on my side than it used to be. And so, please, if you have any problem with it, email me. For some reason, the first group we used, it made them send me emails asking me for permission to get in, and I had to offer them permission. I think I have that fixed, but please reach out to me if you have any problem getting into the Google survey. You must complete the Google survey by the 27th of this month, and then if you will give us about a month to get those certificates out to you. It usually takes about that long. I am running behind, so it's taking longer right now, but usually we get them out somewhere around 3 weeks after the webinar. So, Fred, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it from there.
Well, thank you, Marty. I appreciate it. Well, we're Marty and I are a little at a loss today because our wonderful hostess, Sheila Williamson, who, if you've been on before, you have seen her. She is very ill today, so please lift her up in your prayers, hoping she's getting better. But apparently, it's really going around right now. I think there's a lot of people suffering from illnesses and all. So I hope you all are feeling well and have a healthy holiday season. Today, what we're going to talk about is this is a presentation that kind of came about during COVID. And there was a lot of panic around COVID of, what if I get sick and what if family members get sick and what do we need and do we have everything in place? And if we do, is it going to work? If somebody needs to be on a ventilator. So we had all these things going on during COVID. So I kind of put this presentation together based around that. And that's where that in case of an emergency came from. And also when I was a police officer prior to being prior to going to law school. And as a police officer, I would often see that I'd go into people's houses and they would have this in case of an emergency kind of sticker on their refrigerator or on their freezer. And I found that that was a excellent place for people to store their important documents is in the freezer. I always tell people when I do documents for them, the two things that we worry about more than theft or anything else is fire and flood. And so putting some documents in a chest freezer or freezer in your kitchen is not a bad idea because those are things that are really hard to burn if the house catches fire and it keeps things safe. So, and plus, when first responders and all are there and then they see that on your refrigerator, they'll know that's where they need to go to get these important documents that you have. Now, one of the reasons that we do this is that there are so many people in America that don't have their documents. I've learned over the years as I've done this that about 70% of the population doesn't have proper documents in place. And I say proper documents because some people will do documents and they think they're covered, but they're really not. This is one of those areas where, like everything else, the internet has tried to convince us that going cheap is the way to go. And it's kind of, we as Americans have kind of bought into that concept of saving money, and the internet can help us save money. And so we get a lot of people that will do these online do-it-yourself forms, or they'll go as inexpensive as possible, and they think they've got something in place when they really don't. And we only find out that it's not enough or it's not properly done until it's too late. And so I always tell people, I really hope that you all after this presentation will see that you not only you need to do your documents, but you need to have somebody that knows what they're doing do your documents. And you need to be willing to pay a little bit more for it because the documents are only as good as how well they're written. And I always use the example of, okay, when you buy something under contract, everybody reads the contracts. You go through a house and you're signing document after document after document. And if you go buy, something else, you may sign a one-page document. And so the document is only as good as it's written. And so some documents are more comprehensive than others. And that's exactly the same thing in this world, is that yes, you can do it yourself, or yes, you can get somebody to do it inexpensive and you'll get something, but will it be what you need when you need it? And that's the thing I concern about. And I really don't want that upon anybody because I have situations all the time where if somebody just had spent the money to do their documents right, they would have saved thousands of dollars in the back end because attorneys are like mechanics. We make a lot more money cleaning up the mess than we do keeping your car in order. And so please think about that when you're looking at your documents, when you're doing your documents, and whether or not you have them in the first place. So the thing that always comes to mind when I work on this is how important it is that these documents that people know that these documents are important, even if you think your family will be able to take care of you anyway. And I get that all the time. We need to get these things together. We need them organized for the benefit of you, but also for the benefit of your family. And it makes life so much easier on the family when these things are together. And another thing is a lot of people I get all the time is, well, I'm married, so my spouse will be able to make decisions for me. That's not the case in Texas, and that's not the case in many states. There is not an automatic spousal privilege or an automatic son-daughter privilege, or an automatic parent privilege of another adult. And I get that misconception from people all the time is, oh, well, that's my child, even though they're 21, 22, whatever. If my child goes to the hospital, I'll be able to talk to the doctors and I'll be able to make decisions. And that is not the case. So you need these documents no matter what your family situation is, no matter what your financial situation is, you need these documents. And why do we need documents? We need documents for really two purposes. One is financial and one is medical. Those are the two areas that we have more problems with than anything else. Is if I get sick, who's going to pay my bills? If I get sick, who's going to be able to talk to my employer about my paycheck? Who's going to be able to talk to my 401k provider about getting money out to help pay for my medical expenses or my care? Who's going to be able to talk to Fidelity, Northwest Mutual, Edward Jones, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever it may be, who is going to be able to have the authority to step into my shoes and talk to financial institutions about my money situations? And who's going to be able to make medical decisions for me if I can't make my own? Who's going to be able to have authority to talk to doctors? We all know about HIPAA and how HIPAA put a stranglehold on medical information and medical documentation. And so who's going to be able to do that? Who's going to be able to access that? So really, those are the two areas we really focus on. Now, I'm going to pause here for a minute because some of you all that may have listened to my presentations before might have heard my story. But I think it's important because my story is a perfect example of why this is so very important. For those of you all who have not heard it, I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for almost 28 years now. Prior to being an attorney, I was a police officer out in El Paso, Texas for over 5 years. I am from El Paso. No offense to the people from El Paso, but I used to call El Paso the black hole because I left El Paso 3 times and 3 times it sucked me back in. And so I was in El Paso off and on until 2013 when I moved my family to the DFW area. But in 2006, I was a trial attorney in El Paso. I was practicing law. I've been practicing law for 10 years. And about 5 years into that 10 years, I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. For those that are not familiar, and most of the people on this presentation probably are because you're in the medical area somewhere or some sort. But ulcerative colitis is a severe autoimmune disease of your colon, your large intestine. And it's in essence your body attacking itself. And so in 2001, I was diagnosed. From 2001 till 2006, I took every drug on the market, everything that they had trying to fix this. But the problem was I was at the same time, I was working 80 hours a week as a trial lawyer. And I was literally killing myself working while I was trying to get through this inconvenient disease, is the way I looked at it. At the end of 2006, the doctors came to me and they said, we either remove your colon or you're going to have colon cancer. I was 41 years of age. And I'm not ashamed to say that at that point in my life, I was such an arrogant, a matter-of-fact trial lawyer that my only question to the doctors was, how long am I going to be off work? And they looked at me funny and said, a minimum of 3 months. And I thought to myself, well, that means I can be back in about 6 weeks. And I learned during this time, if you ever want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, because God had different plans for me. The doctors messed up my operation. My intestines ruptured. I was in critical condition for 10 days. I was so medically sick with sepsis and infection that I medically should not have survived. I was in the hospital 37 days the first time. I was in and out of hospitals and surgeries for over 18 months, and I was out of work for over 8 months. I ended up having to have 6 surgeries. The last two, they had to take me up to Cleveland, to the Cleveland Clinic, to put me back together and save my life. And although it was the worst time of my life that I would not wish on my worst enemy, sometimes tragedies in your life are blessings. And God knew this is the blessing that I needed. because I had controlled my life. I had run my life. I had decided what Fred was going to do and how he was going to do it. And I almost killed myself doing it. And God knew that he couldn't tap me on the shoulder. He had to kick me off my feet to get my attention. And so during that time period, I went through a lot, but one of the things I did a lot of soul searching. And I said, okay, God, if you get me through this, I'll do what you want me to do, not what I want to do. And I didn't even know if I was going to practice law. But when I got back on my feet, I got introduced to the world of elder law. And when I first got called and asked, hey, why don't you come do elder law with us? My first question was, what the hell is elder law? And I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. And so they sat down with me and they talked about probate and how they help people when people pass away, and guardianship. And guardianship in Texas is when adults become incapacitated and they need another adult appointed as their legal guardian to take care of them. And then they talked about what I'm going to talk about today. And this is the documents they help people put in place to make sure that when problems happen in life, it's not a problem to you or your family. And as they were going through these documents, I joke about it, but I said I went into husband mode because husbands are the greatest at looking at their wife straight in the eye and not hearing a single word she says. Because as they were describing these documents to me, my mind went back to the gurney, hearing the ER doc ask my wife at the time, does he have a medical power of attorney? Does he have a medical directive? Does he have a HIPAA form? Does he have a will? I had nothing. 41 years of age and an attorney, and I had no documents in place whatsoever because I had the same attitude most people do. Well, I got plenty of time. I'll get to it when I get to it. I'm busy now. I don't have time to do it right now. I'll get to it. And I'm invincible. I'm not going to be sick, so I don't have anything to worry about. And then on top of that, I'm an attorney, so I think I know more than everybody in this area. And during that moment, I realized that's what God was calling me to do. He was calling me to help people put together plans so that they don't go through what me and my family went through. My electricity almost got turned off while I was in the hospital 37 days because I took care of all the bills prior to being sick. And my wife comes in and says, they're going to turn the electricity off and they won't talk to me because my name's not on the electric bill and I don't have your HIPAA, your power of attorney. She came to me one day and said, well, I need your medical records to file a disability claim that, your disability insurance, and they won't give you your medical records because you didn't sign a HIPAA form when you came in under an emergency situation. She came in and said the disability company won't talk to me because the policy's in your name and I don't have your power of attorney. So the simplest things that we take for granted every day become absolute nightmares when we don't have our documents in place. So the reality is if you don't have documents, even your family members are looked at as strangers. The financial institutions, the hospitals, the medical people, they don't know who you are. They don't know if you are who you say you are. And so they need proof that you have a right to talk to them. And another thing you've got to always remember is all of these people are afraid of one thing more than they're afraid of anything else, and that's they're afraid of being sued. So they're not going to take any chances of putting themselves in a position of being sued for giving the wrong information to the wrong people or giving money to somebody that didn't have authority to get that money. So your family has no more right to your medical or financial information than a stranger on the street if you don't have documents. So what kind of things do we need to think about when we're looking at why we need these documents? There are two things in life that I take care of. I take care of incapacity and I take care of death. That's my business. I'm in the business of sickness, disability, injury, incapacity, and death. And a lot of people think about death. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to really think about it. But, oh, okay, yeah, I need a will. I've been told I need a will because when I die, I don't want my family to have to go through problems. So I need a will. But we don't think about, well, what if I get sick? What if I'm in a car accident on the way home and I'm incapacitated for 2 to 3 weeks? Because people don't think of, oh, well, permanent incapacity. Well, there's temporary incapacity. My temporary incapacity was 8 months. I was completely out of touch for 8 months. I couldn't go to the bank. I couldn't do any of that for 8 months. And so for 8 months we had difficulties, and made my wife's life very, very difficult because I didn't have my documents in order. Because if I can't do it, who's going to manage my money? Who's going to talk to the bank? Who's going to pay my bills? Who's going to transfer funds? Who's going to consent to medical treatment or make medical decisions, or even get my medical information? Who's going to talk to my employer? Who's going to talk to my, if I'm a student at college, who's going to talk to my teachers or my educational institution? On and on and on it goes on, things that we just don't even think about. The worst thing to me that could ever happen is for my daughter. I have two beautiful daughters. I am blessed beyond blessed. I have a 19-year-old that is currently on full scholarship as a competitive springboard platform diver at the University of New Mexico. And I have a 22-year-old who just graduated from the University of Alabama, who we're not going to even start talking about why they're not in the playoffs. Um, and she is currently applying to medical school, and probably will start medical school in 2025. So I am blessed. I'm blessed beyond blessed. But what would happen if one of them was in a car accident? When my daughter was in Alabama, if she was in a car accident out in Tuscaloosa, and she goes to the hospital, and I call up and say, "Hey, I'm Ashton's dad. Tell me what's going on." What are they going to want to know? Dad, I don't know if you're dad or not because I can't see you. We're talking over the phone. And is there a HIPAA form on file somewhere where daughter has given you permission to talk to us? Because daughter's 22. She's not a child anymore. She's now an adult. In Texas, adult is 18. And so the worst thing to me could ever be is, "I'm sorry, we can't talk to you about this because we don't have the proper forms in place." If she's incapacitated and can't make her own decisions, who will make decisions for her? And a lot of people don't understand that if you don't have documents in place, the medical people have 100% legal authority to make all decisions. They don't have to consult with family whatsoever. Now, a lot of times they will, and a lot of times they're courteous about it, but they don't have to. And so, who would make decisions, important decisions for medical treatment and medical care? I also look at the other things like, I've given you a bunch of lists, and you guys will get these PowerPoint slides after this is over. So I know some people like taking notes. If you do, great, but you don't have to because you're going to get all this. But a lot of what I put together is just kind of lists to make people think about things, because I always will have this list, and it'll hit one of the things will hit somebody and go, "Oh yeah, I remember when that happened. I remember when my daughter got sick and I couldn't talk to her landlord about her lease. I couldn't talk to the mortgage company. I couldn't talk to government benefits about, Social Security, disability, or whatever the case may be." So it's things that you just don't think about. And the worst thing that ever happens to me in my office is when somebody calls me and says something like, "Mom is in a nursing home. I had to move mom to memory care because her Alzheimer's is getting worse. And I need to pay mom's bills. I need to be able to access her account, or I need to be able to sell her house to pay for her care. And I need to bring mom in to do a power of attorney." And I have to tell these people, "I'm sorry, but if mom is already in memory care, the likelihood that I can do a document for her is slim to none, because she has to understand what she's signing. And if the person can't understand what they're signing, I can't do a document for them." So instead of a $250 document, we now have to look at guardianship. Guardianship is a long, drawn out, humiliating, extremely expensive legal courtroom process that on average runs $10,000 to $15,000 because of all the things involved in it. So we've now gone from a $250 document to a $10,000 guardianship because they didn't bring mom in when mom was still able to sign. So people ask me all the time, "When do I need to do my documents?" You need your documents before you need your documents. So you need to do them while you're well. You need to get mom or dad in to sign these documents while mom and dad still understand what they're signing and still can give permission to people to take care of those things. I put this slide together because this is one that really comes in into play with students. One of the plans that I put together for people is what I call a college student protection plan. It's not a comprehensive plan because it doesn't need to be, because most 18, 19-year-olds don't have a lot. They don't have houses and marriages and finances and 401ks and all that. But they do still need documents, because both of my daughters, the minute they turned 18, I did a plan for them because I want to be able to take care of things. My daughter is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she needed to register her car. Her car was up for registration. I needed to be able to go down to the licensing place and register her car without a problem because she's an adult. And now I need permission to take care of my adult child. And so traffic tickets, jury duty, passports, all these things that renew that we don't think about that can come up with our kids especially. So the big thing to remember, no documents, no authority. So what documents do we need? They fall into two categories. Like I said already, I look at my documents as living documents and death documents. We need certain documents while we're alive, and I call them living documents because they live with you and they die with you. These living documents are not good after death. And I get that all the time. I'll get things like, oh, I got dad's power of attorney. Dad died last week. I'm going to take it to the bank so I can get some money to pay his bills. Nope. Sorry. You can't use dad's power of attorney after dad died. Sorry. You need death documents. So there's living documents and death documents. The living documents fall into two categories: financial and medical. Your financial document is your statutory durable power of attorney. Now, statutory means it comes out of the law. There is a law written that says what this document should have in it. Now, I don't like that because a lot of people say, well, it's a statute, so I can get online and all statutory durable power of attorneys are created equal because they're all written by the law. That is not true whatsoever, because a statutory durable power of attorney says these are the minimum requirements for this document. Now, the problem is Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, Capital One, Fidelity, Northwest Mutual, et cetera, those people don't want the minimum requirements. They want more. They want a document that details and says you specifically have permission to deal with this situation. For instance, if it's a 401k, does the document specifically give permission for you to access and manage this person's 401k or IRA? Does it specifically give you instructions and permission to manage and sell real estate for this person? So an internet form might be 3 pages long. My forms are 10 to 15 pages long because I want my clients to have everything they need. So no matter what situation they're in, they have it covered in their document. Because if the document doesn't cover the situation, it's as if you don't have the document at all. So that's why, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you have good documents. This document is the one we have more problems with than any other document. And that's because it's dealing with financial institutions and they have more rules than anybody else. And I'll get those calls. I'll get somebody that'll say, hey, this is one I got not long ago. This lady was trying to take care of her mom. I had done mom's documents about 7 or 8 years earlier. And she says, I'm trying to deal with mom's finances because mom's now in memory care. And they're telling me my power of attorney is no good because it's older than 5 years old. Does it expire? And I said, no, these documents don't expire, but their internal rule is that they will not accept a document older than 5 years old. And she says, how can they do that? I said, there's a big difference between the law and their rules. And they can make rules that are more stringent than what the law says. And so we were in a bind because mom couldn't make a new document. And so luckily I was able to talk to the financial institution. We were able to get them to accept this 7-year-old document, but that's not always the case. And so you have to abide by their rules. The second category is your healthcare documents. This is your medical power of attorney. That is a document that gives you authority to make medical decisions for somebody who can't make them for themselves. So if you're in a hospital and you're conscious, the doctors have to talk to you. But if you're not conscious and you can't make decisions, then the doctors say, do you have a medical power of attorney? Because that says who can make decisions for you. Or if you don't have that, we get to make the decisions as the medical providers. You want an advanced medical directive. Now that is called many names. There's a lot of names for the same document. It used to be called a living will. In Texas, we call it a directive to physicians. But this is a document that is different than what often people will call me and say, I need a do not resuscitate or a DNR. This is not a DNR. A DNR is a don't touch me document. No matter what happens to me, do not bring me back. That's what a DNR is. I typically only do DNRs for people on hospice or people at end of life. My mom is almost 93. She's in a nursing home in Frisco, and she wanted a DNR because she said, if I have a heart attack, don't bring me back. I've lived long enough. And now I'm in a nursing home and I don't like this anyway, so I want a DNR. Everybody else needs a directive to physicians or an advanced directive. This is a document that says, do everything you can to make me well, do everything you can to treat me. But if you've exhausted all medical means and there's no more hope, and now the decision is only sustain my life on a machine, put me on life support to keep me alive, or let me die naturally, which one do you want? While you're well, you decide which one you want. You decide if you want to be kept alive on life support, or you decide if you want to pull the plug. Now, I love this document because I'm making the decision for myself and I'm taking that decision away from my family. If anybody out there has ever had to make that decision, you know it's the worst decision you'll ever make in your life. And you will question your decision the rest of your life. I don't want to do that to my daughters. I don't want to do that to my wife. I don't want them to have to live with, did they make the right decision? Instead, I've already made the decision. This is what I want. HIPAA release, we hear of HIPAA all the time. HIPAA. I recommend my clients get a universal HIPAA form, meaning it's good anywhere and everywhere. That's different than the ones you sign when you go to the hospital or you sign when you go to the doctor. A lot of people don't understand. When I go to a doctor's office and I sign their HIPAA form, it's only good at that office and it's written in their favor, not in my favor. So I want a form that's written in my favor and good anywhere. So if I'm in a car wreck on the way home, no matter what hospital they take me to, I've got a HIPAA form that says you can talk to my wife, you can talk to my daughters, you can talk to my son, you can talk to whoever I want. And that way we don't have to worry about signing forms at any specific institution. A declaration of guardian in case of incapacity, that is a document we want, but we don't want to ever use, because if we're using it, we're in court, because guardianship is a courtroom process. But this is a form that says, if I ever become totally incapacitated and there is a need to appoint me a guardian, I'm going to decide who my guardian is going to be. I don't want the court deciding. I don't want my family fighting over it. I'm going to tell you, I want this person, and if they can't do it, I want first alternate, second alternate. I usually name about 3 people on there. Another great thing about that form is you get to name who you don't want your guardians to be. So if there's troublemakers in the family or people you just don't want to burden, you can disqualify them. So those are your living documents. People ask me all the time, do I carry these documents around with me? How do people know I have them? I recommend a company called DocuBank. DocuBank is an online storage of these types of forms. Now, DocuBank is a company I've been using probably 18, 20 years. You can look up, that's why I gave you this slide. You can look them up on the internet. The cost of joining it is very, very reasonable. I'm not sure what it is now, but I think the last I looked, it was like $150 for a 5-year membership. And when you sign up for DocuBank, they're going to send you a card like this. This card you carry in your wallet. I carry it behind my driver's license. And it tells them, this is who I am. These are allergies I have. These are medical conditions I have. These are the people I want you to contact in case of an emergency. This is my doctor and this is my law office who did my documents. And on the back of this form, it gives them instructions on how they can download your medical power of attorney, your medical directive, your HIPAA form. Because when you sign up for DocuBank, you're going to upload those forms to them, and then they hold on to them until somebody needs them. And then when they download them, um, the minute a medical provider asks for those forms, your contact people get contacted. So if I'm in a car accident when I'm driving across country and I'm out in Idaho somewhere and I don't know anybody in Idaho, I get in a car accident, I get taken to the hospital asks for my forms, those DocuBank will notify my next of kin. It's a great, great company. They've done phenomenal work for many, many years. I highly, highly recommend them. And anybody can use them. I send all my clients to them. But if you already have your documents, you can sign up for DocuBank and then upload them. It's really a great, great thing. So those again are your living documents. From there, we look at death documents. I'm not going to focus as much on death documents in this presentation because I know we're probably getting close to running out of time. And I do want to give people time for questions. I want to honor your time. But these are, again, still part of the in case of emergency. When I think of in case of emergency, I really think of your living documents more than anything else. But what about death documents? When a person passes away, what do they have? More people than not don't have anything. And I tell people, if you don't have a will, Texas has a will for you. And I guarantee you're not going to want it because Texas doesn't know you. Texas doesn't know your family. Doesn't care what you want. Texas has written certain laws to encompass society as a whole. And so you want at least a will. What is a will? A will is a document that says, when I pass away, this is who I want my stuff to go to. That's really all it does. Now, people talk about it all the time. What else can a will do? And I'll go into that in a minute. But when it really comes down to it, when you're looking at a will, you write a will to pass on your assets. That's it. Other documents that we do a designation of representative for disposition of remains, which I don't like the title of that form, but it's the people in charge of your funeral wishes. So I highly recommend people do that because I've seen more fights because of funeral issues, family fights, because there's somebody in the family that doesn't believe in cremation, and mom said she wanted to be cremated, and I don't want her to be cremated, and then families fight over it. This way, you're appointing somebody that you trust to carry out your wishes. So whatever those wishes are, you've appointed somebody. Now, another thing I highly recommend people do is talk to funeral homes about prepaid funeral arrangements. And I know some people think that's really kind of morbid to think about, I'm going to plan my death. The reality is you plan for everything. You plan when you go on a trip. People don't just get up and go very often. They usually say, oh, okay, well, we want to go to Cancun in June. What do we need to do? We need to book a hotel. We need to book our flights. Well, you're going to die. We're all going to die. So what's wrong with planning for that? It's not a morbid thing whatsoever because it is inevitable in every single one of our lives. And so the best gift you can give your family is a gift of peace of mind, a gift of relief, a gift of not having to make all those decisions. And funeral home directors that I know tell me the exact same thing that I feel about my business. The more emotion that a person has in the moment, the more money they're going to spend. And so when you die and you leave all of that decision to your family during that horrible emotional time of grief when they're going through the loss of a loved one, they're going to spend more money on the funeral than you ever would have. So why not do it ahead of time, plan it, get it in place? That way, all they have to do is carry it out. It makes family so much easier on their life. So please think about that. The other one we do for people that want to is I do a form called an anatomical gift form. A lot of people will tell the DPS when they get a driver's license, I want to be an organ donor. Well, that's great, but it doesn't really tell them what that means. An anatomical gift form specifically says what you mean by that. Are you donating your organs just for transplantation purposes? Are you willing to donate your organs for research or for therapy or for other means? Are you wanting to donate your body to medicine? Are you wanting to donate it to science? What exactly do you want to allow them to do? This form even says, do I give them permission to do an autopsy on me? And so it's a very good form for what do you want them to do to your body after you pass away? Now, those are the minimum death documents because I personally do not think that a will is enough, especially in Texas. I don't know the way all states are, but in Texas, a will is not a will until a judge says it's a will. And so I tell people I call a will a wish. I have that wish on my paper. I've written this document. It tells my wishes, and my wishes cannot be carried out until a judge gives somebody permission to carry them out. That's called an executor. So part of my will, I'm saying I'm appointing these people to carry out my wishes. That person, the executor, is not the executor until the judge appoints them as executor. And so people don't realize that just because you have a will doesn't mean you're avoiding probate. And for those of you all that don't know the term probate, probate is the legal process a person has to go through to administer someone's estate after they die. So if my mom passes away with a will and there's assets that need to be handled and administered, I have to take her will to court. I have to go before the judge. I have to get the judge's permission for me to be appointed executor to carry out my mom's wishes. Now, I can't do that on my own in Texas because in Texas, we have a law that says you have to hire an attorney. I call it my job security laws. Isn't that nice? You have to hire an attorney. So you have to hire an attorney. You have to deal with a judge. And some judges are good, some judges not so good. Some counties are better to die in than others because the courts are better. And so a will is good, but a will is not the best way to go. Most people can highly benefit from a trust. Now, I get the question all the time, do I need a trust? And it always reminds me of my daughters. My daughters would always say, Dad, I need a new pair of shoes. I need those shoes. And then I'd have to tell them, okay, let's talk about the difference between need and want. Do you need those shoes or do you just want those shoes? Now, so people ask me all the time, do I need a trust? Some families need a trust. Some families that have special needs children. If you have a special needs child, you need a trust that has a special needs trust in it. Because the worst thing you can ever leave a disabled person or disabled child is an inheritance. An inheritance can cause a person on disability to lose all their benefits. They could lose their Social Security disability. They could lose their Medicaid if they inherit something outside of a special needs trust. So I tell people like that, you need a trust. Some people with a lot of money need a trust because if you don't have a trust and you're very, very wealthy, the government's going to get more money than your family is. So why not use a trust to capitalize on all the tax laws so that you keep more money in your family and less money to Uncle Sam? But everybody else that I deal with, most people can really benefit from a trust. So you may not absolutely need it, but you definitely benefit from it. A trust, and what I'm referring to now is there's, as you can see at the bottom of the page, there's all kinds of trusts. And this is just a sampling because there's thousands of different types of trusts depending on what my clients need. But a revocable living trust is the best thing you can ever have. because if you put it in place during your life, it has certain life benefits. So, for instance, my irrevocable living trust says I want my family to be able to continue taking care of me and my finances, even if I stop cooperating because of a disability. And typically we have that because of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's with the stage of paranoia. Now all of a sudden, mom thinks everybody's stealing her money. Mom thinks everybody wants to kill her. And mom is going through these delusional things because her mind is playing tricks on her. If mom stops cooperating, then mom's living documents may not be any good. And I had this case in El Paso. I had a daughter taking care of mom forever. Mom's Alzheimer's went to paranoia. Mom called her doctor and said, "Don't talk to my daughter anymore. She wants me dead." And even though the doctor knew that wasn't true, the doctor had to honor that and could no longer honor the medical power of attorney. Mom called the bank and said, "Do not talk to my daughter anymore. Do not let her have any access to my accounts because she's stealing all my money." And even though the bank knew that wasn't true, they had to honor it. And now her power of attorney was dead. And so this girl had to come to me and we had to do a guardianship to give her authority back exactly the way she had it with the living documents prior to mom not cooperating. A trust helps prevent that because my trust says I want my family to take care of me even if I don't cooperate. If I'm determined to be incapacitated, they can continue managing my money. They can continue taking care of me even if I don't cooperate. Now I put that in place while I'm well. So when it comes out that says, when dad was well, this is what he wanted, and they have to carry that out. A trust also will avoid probate if you do it properly. And again, these are things that I always have to tell people that just because you put a trust in place and some attorney or some place, because we have a lot of institutions that'll sell people trusts, and we call them trust mills. They sell a one size fits all trust to whoever will buy them, but they don't do any follow up. And so I always tell my clients a trust is like a treasure chest. You have to build the treasure chest you want, and then you have to hold your treasure in it. So you have to deed your house into the trust. You have to align your accounts with the trust. You have to align your financials with your trust. And so we help our clients make sure they align everything with their treasure chest. Now, if everything is aligned properly with the treasure chest, then I always tell people, I'm proud to tell people I'm not worth one single penny. Because if I don't have any assets of my own, because all my assets are in my trust, then I don't have an estate, and there's no need to probate because there's no need to probate an estate I don't have. My estate is in my trust, and a trust does not get sick, and a trust does not die. So sickness and death don't affect what's in the trust. Sickness and death, the trust says what happens during sickness and death. So my trust says if I get sick, my assets are used to take care of me. If I die, my assets go here. And trust can be modified for your specific family. If you're a blended family, the trust can say, okay, if I die first, I want my wife to continue to be able to live on my estate. But when she dies, I want my half to go to my kids from my first marriage, and she can give her half to her kids from her first marriage. You can do things like that. We can do remarriage protection that says, if I die first, I want to secure my half for my kids so that if my wife gets remarried, she can't give my half away. I call that the Anna Nicole Smith protection. So we can do all kinds of things with a trust. I can build into my trust, I can build a trust for my children. And that's called a heritage trust. And how that works is it says, when mom and I die and it goes to our children, instead of it going outright to them where it can be taken from them, we want it to go from our trust to their heritage trust. And their heritage trust has asset protection so that that inheritance can't be taken by lawsuits, creditors, bankruptcy, or divorce. And being the daddy of two beautiful girls, I worry about divorce. I want to give my daughters an inheritance. I don't want half of it to go to my future ex-son-in-law if their marriage doesn't work out. So there's all kinds of things you can do with a trust like that. It's the greatest invention ever made. And I do more trust work out of my office than I do anything else because people say, well, why didn't anybody ever tell me about that? That's what I want. I want to protect my family. I want to make sure that if I die first, my wife isn't scrambling to have to go through probate and do all these things. It's just a great, great mechanism. Now, looking at that list on the bottom, you can see there's asset protection trusts. We do those for very wealthy people. We do tax planning trusts. We do retirement plan trusts when people have very, very high retirement money. If you have a lot of money in your 401k or your IRA, you need to talk to somebody because that money used to be the best inheritance you could leave your children. It is now the absolute worst inheritance you can leave your children. So a lot of people will have a million and a half, sometimes in a IRA or 401k, and they're never going to use it during their lifetime. They're going to pass it on to their children. And prior to 2017, that was a great idea. Prior to 2020, when the worst law, the Secure Act, came out, that was a good idea. Today, it's a terrible idea. So talk to a financial advisors, talk to people. What do I do with that money so that I can use it today or I can move it into other accounts? I can pay the tax on it so I'm not burdening my children. I don't want to go too in depth with that, but that's retirement plan trust planning. And then there's Medicaid planning. I do Medicaid trusts so that somebody can qualify for Medicaid in 5 years if they have assets and they want to shelter those assets so that they don't lose everything they have if they ever go into Medicaid. There's ways of doing that. So it's trusts are just really, really excellent mechanisms. So buyer beware. I tell this because I really think a lot of people don't understand how dangerous it is to do things over the internet. I think we all think of social media and we think of what's happening to our kids, but we don't think about what can happen to us if we do things. So whenever somebody tells me, well, I can do documents over the internet, I can do documents from these companies like Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom and all these things, and I can save a lot of money doing that. And that is true. You can, but it is 100% buyer beware. Years ago, when it first came out, I got so frustrated with the bad documents that were coming through my office that I thought about starting my own website where I could provide legal documents, Texas minimum required legal documents for the do-it-yourselfer. And that way, if somebody used my website, I knew that they were at least getting the minimum document requirements that they need. And during that process, I went through, I called the ethics attorney at the State Bar of Texas, and I left her a message telling her what I wanted to do. She called me back and she said, Mr. Heyman, I understand what you want to do. And you said that you wanted to make sure you're compliant with state bar rules and that you're completely above board in everything that you do. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she starts laughing. And I sat there for a minute and I thought, okay, what's so funny about that? And she said, Mr. Heyman, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at our wonderful Texas government. Because apparently somebody, and this is exactly how she put it. She said, apparently somebody from LegalZoom has gotten to our Texas legislature before you could, and they were able to convince them to put a law into the Texas government code. So in essence, it's a hidden law within the Texas government code because nobody knows what a Texas government code is. And it says that if you are, it defines the practice of law. And it specifically, as you can see by this page, it defines what isn't the practice of law. And according to this new law that was passed years ago now, if you are providing documents over the internet and you clearly state that you are not a law firm and that this is not a substitute for attorney advice, you are not providing legal documents, you are not practicing law, and therefore you are not liable if those documents suck. Pardon my bluntness, but that's really what it comes down to. So if those are bad documents, there is no liability against LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or any of these online companies because all they have to do on their website is to put a disclaimer saying we are not a law firm. If you want legal advice, you need to go see a lawyer because we're not a lawyer. We're just providing you these documents. And so the ethics lawyer told me it's like you selling a pen over the internet. It's no different than any other product sold over the internet. And so I got off the phone and I thought, okay, if I sell somebody a pen, how do they know when that pen works? when they go to use it, right? If I sell you a will, how do you know when that will works? When it's too late. So people are buying documents over the internet and they honestly do not know what they're getting. And it could be okay, but it might not be okay. So, and there is no liability. If I carry legal malpractice insurance because I'm liable to my clients if I screw up. Doctors carry medical malpractice because if they screw up, they're liable. These companies are not liable whatsoever. They have basically been able to pass laws putting the burden 100% on the consumer. So it's in essence, it makes me angry because it screws over the consumer. It's terrible. So here's one I pulled, when I did this together, I pulled a couple of them. This is LegalZoom's disclaimer, but this is not by an attorney-client privilege, or this is not work product. We're not a law firm or a substitute for attorney advice. And this one is Rocket Lawyer. They're a little bit more in depth. We do not review any information you provide. These are legal forms. These are just given to you, and you're on your own. This is not protected by privileged communications. So all they have to do is put this on their website and they're clean. And if you don't have anything better to do, pull up some of these websites and see how long it takes you to find the disclaimer page, because it doesn't have to be front and center. It just has to be on their website. So what else should we have in the ICE PAC? Some other things that we have other than the legal documents. We want to make sure that we have things that are included that are highly important to people's situations. Your driver's license, your Social Security cards, your Medicaid cards, your Medicaid supplement cards. Anything that a person would need. It is a great idea to keep these copied somewhere and have them where your family can find them. Yes, I know that there is a serious concern about identity theft and people getting a hold of things that they shouldn't get a hold of. That's why it's very important you do somewhere they'll be safe. This information will be safe. Now, DocuBank has that medical side where I can upload my medical records and make it accessible to hospitals. DocuBank also has what they call DocuSafe, which is an online storage of anything you want to store. And it's like online banking. It's highly secured and it's username, password protected. I know some people aren't comfortable doing that, but I have never heard of them ever being hacked. And it's a way to save this kind of information so that your family members, all you have to provide them with is, hey, if something happens to me, go to this website and here's my login information and you'll be able to get everything that you need for me. I have people that will upload their trust and upload their life insurance documents and upload all the stuff that people need. So however you feel safe, you need to put this information, organize it, put it in a safe place for your family. That's the best thing you could ever do for your family. I had a case years ago where I don't do this. I used to not do it at all. I now have a company that I formed that will do it. But I never used to be an executor or a trustee or somebody, for my clients. And I had a very good friend whose wife died. He begged me to be the executor of his will. And he said, please, because if you're the executor, my family won't fight. And if you're not, they will. And he was right. They didn't fight because I took over. But he was as unorganized could be. And it took me over 3 years to administer his estate because I couldn't find things. Like he had stocks and bonds and investments that I couldn't find. And it took me years to find some of it. I had to hire companies to track down assets. I remember one time I got a phone call and they said, well, I think I found the most valuable asset he has. He had stock in Enron. And this is after Enron went under. And so it was a joke that it wasn't worth anything. But he had stock in Enron. And I said, well, let's get the certificate and we'll frame it. Maybe we can get some money for the framed Enron certificate because that's about all it's worth. But please don't do that to your family. The more organized you are, the easier it will be on your family. So contact lists. Who's important to you? Who's your CPA, your financial advisor, your alarm company? I mean, the simplest things you don't even think about because we do it every day. We just take care of things. Who do you want your family to contact? You have animals. You have a vet. You don't want your family just calling anybody. Who's your veterinarian? So all those kind of things are important. Your bills, what bills do you have? I get that all the time. Somebody passes away and we're waiting for months to try to figure out what debt they had. And we got to wait for bills to come in. And some of those don't come in because we're online now and I don't have online access. And now what do I do? And so it just becomes really, really difficult when you don't organize all this. So I'm not going to go through all of this information. I'm going to let you guys look at it at your own leisure, but this gives you a great example of all the things that you really need to think about. Now, information without implementation is worse than a waste of time. You all have spent over an hour now, about an hour now on this. We're going to do an hour and a half total. Please, please, please don't just take this information and do nothing with it. Don't just waste this hour and a half just to get CLE or CE credit. Use this hour and a half information. Use what I've told you and put it into place and do something for you and your family. Make sure that you guys do things. Help family members that may not have this. This presentation will be available for somebody else to watch. I know we put it on our websites and I know Marty puts it out. If there's people in your family that need this information, please share it with them. That's the best gift you can ever give is help somebody put things in place to take care of them and their families. So please don't do this. I love this picture and I love this quote. Only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone. Pablo Picasso. So please, this is not one of those things you want to leave undone. Do something with this information. So I have talked as long as I'm going to talk. I am now going to turn it back over to Marty. I'm going to pull up the chat box, the question box, and see if we can mumble through since we don't have our wonderful Sheila who usually keeps us on track. But we're going
Well,
to answer as many questions as we can.
I'll ask you a few of the questions first because we've got lots of time here if you're ready. Well, first of all, Martha Brown just says thank you. Just just wanted to thank you for the life story that you shared that they can share with others, and was very appreciative. Um, there's another question. There's a question about are there any documents that will be honored internationally?
Um, that depends. No, the base answer is no, because every country is different. But there are some countries that will honor each other countries. So like us and Great Britain, we have most of our allies. The documents are honored. But I would never know because it all depends on the other country and whether they will accept documents from the United States. I had an interesting one just this last week. I had a family from India and we're doing some trust work for them. And he has some land in India that he inherited and he's going to leave to his two sons. And I told him that the documents that I do, he needs to talk to somebody in India. Well, I guess after talking to somebody in India, he asked me, can you do me a separate will that just says my land in India goes to my sons? Because when I die, they can take that will to India and India will honor that. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, I don't know if they'll honor my trust, but they'll honor this will. So I'm doing him an extra document just for this India land. So again, it all depends on the country we're dealing with.
Very good. Excuse me. Dina says, "What do you do if you aren't married and don't have a great relationship with your siblings? Who do you ask to make these commitments?"
That's difficult, and I'm dealing with it more and more every day. I'm dealing with a lot of families who either don't have family members because they've got small families, or they don't have family members they trust, or something like that. And so I always tell people there's three categories that we consider when we're naming people. Um, First is friends and family. Now, again, it's friends and family because some people may not have family that they trust or they like, but they do have good friends that they could appoint. and that's somebody to think about. Um, if not, then we look at the two other categories are private professional fiduciaries or corporate fiduciaries. Now, corporate fiduciaries are people like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, those big guys. And the corporate fiduciaries don't like being, they typically will not be appointed as agents under power of attorney and stuff. They won't do that. They will be a trustee or an executor, but only if the estate's large. They want to, I've heard 2 million and no up. They don't like it if it's less than that. So there's been a big upturn in what are called private professional fiduciaries. These are smaller companies or individuals who are licensed. Sometimes they're licensed, depending on the state. They are bonded or insured, and they can serve as both agent under power of attorney. They can serve as agent under medical power of attorney. They can serve as executor, trustee, anything like that. Now, I was so curious about it because I've had my clients ask me over the years if I could do it as their attorney, and I've never been comfortable because I don't want to cross that attorney relationship with private fiduciary relationship. Well, I met a gentleman up in Colorado Springs named Doug Goldberg, and Doug has a firm, a law firm that he does estate planning, but he also opened a second company for his private professional fiduciary company. As an attorney, he doesn't have to be licensed there. He's exempt from the licensing, and he could set up this company to serve as trustee and executor and all for his clients. And it's worked really, really well. Well, I looked at it in Texas, and thank God in Texas, they're the same requirements. So I personally just recently started the Guardian Trustee Group. And so my second company can serve as agents and power of attorney and stuff like that. But if you'll just Google private professional fiduciary, you should be able to find somebody in your area that does that work.
Okay, very good. Um, so there's one here. Can I avoid probate without a trust if I have a power of, I'm sorry, POD?
Pay on death.
Okay. For bank accounts, named beneficiaries for insurance and 401k transfer on death deed for the house, affidavit of heirship to transfer car title, and those are the only assets I have.
Okay. So yes, there are ways to avoid probate other than doing a trust. Now, those things that you're talking about work really, really well as long as life goes exactly the way you want it to go. And what I mean by that is if I set up all my accounts, okay, so for those of you all that aren't familiar with the terms, there are three terms that banks and financial institutions like to use, and all three terms mean exactly the same thing. And that is beneficiary, transfer on death or TOD, and pay on death or POD. So you'll hear those terms all the time: transfer on death, TOD, pay on death, POD, or beneficiary. All three of them mean the exact same thing. So if I set up my accounts with, and I'm just going to use beneficiary, I have beneficiaries on all my accounts. That works wonderful if at the time I die, the people I've named are alive and healthy. If they're not alive, there's a big problem because then it'll go to their estate and their estate will have to deal with it. And quite often, their estate is going to leave that money someplace that maybe you didn't want to leave it to. Or if they're disabled, then it can cause a major problem because if they're incapacitated and they can't sign to accept it, there's major problems. And I've had to do guardianships because that happened. So I always tell people, yes, it's a way to do it, but you're taking a risk because you're gambling on life going exactly perfect. A trust is designed for an imperfect life because a lot of what we do in trusts, I tell people I love what I do, but one of the things I have to live in that I'm not crazy about is I live in a world of worst case scenarios because I have to think of all of the things that might happen. And we put those in a trust so that it says, I want to leave this money to my daughter. But if my daughter is incapacitated, I don't want her to lose government benefits. So I want it to go into a special needs trust for her. If my daughter has passed away, I don't want it to go to my daughter's estate where it might go to her husband if she's married. I want to make sure it goes to my grandchildren. Or if she doesn't have children, I want to make sure it goes to my other daughter, her sister, which probably wouldn't happen if that went to her estate. So I can do all these things in a trust that you cannot do in POD, TOD, or beneficiary. A transfer on death deed for your house is risky because that law has only been in effect about 9 years. And we're concerned that we're concerned about how title companies may view those deeds in the future because there's some uncertainty in the statute of the way it's written. The transfer on death deed statute was really written so that we could avoid a probate when a husband and wife die. So right now in Texas, we hold property as what's called joint tenants in common. I own 50%, my wife owns 50%, and if I die, it doesn't automatically become hers. She has to go through probate to get my half transferred. A transfer on death deed avoids that so that it says if I die, it's her house. If she dies, it's my house. But people are using it to transfer property to their kids, and that wasn't what the statute really was meant for. And I don't know how the title companies are going to view that in the future. So again, that can be done, yes, but there are risks involved in doing it that way.
Okay, Brianna asked, I just moved to Texas from Michigan. I was my mother's guardian. Do I need to do another guardianship here?
Okay, first, if you move from another state to another state, you need documents from the state you now live in. So documents are state specific. And you need to have documents from your state of residency. So for you personally, if you have Michigan documents, or even if you didn't, you need Texas documents. Now, if you're guardian of your mom and your mom, that guardianship was in Michigan, and you have moved mom to Texas, then yes, the guardianship has to transfer from one state to another. And that requires a court process. That requires us usually getting some documentation from Michigan and filing them in a court in Texas to transfer that over. And it has to be filed in the county that mom is residing in now. So yes, you need to speak to a guardianship attorney about that.
Fred, can I get you to transfer to move the slides, advance them one?
Okay.
I should have had you do this earlier.
That's okay.
This is Fred. You guys, if you have any questions after the webinar for Fred, here's Fred's contact information. You will receive. You'll see in the chat. I've put the link to these slides several times, but you'll also receive a link to the slide and the contact information in the follow-up email that will go out tomorrow. And so now, if you can go ahead, that's all the questions I see for right now.
Okay. I'm not seeing any. Do we have the question? Do we just have the chat box up, Marty?
No, I have the Q&A, and I've asked people to put them in the Q&A, and I've been reading them out of there, but I've been dismissing them each time I read them. So there were 4 in the Q&A that I asked.
We still have about 10 minutes. If anybody else has any other further questions, go ahead and send them in.
Yes.
I will. Go ahead.
And then in the meantime, I'll read off the CEU information, and we'll give people a chance to put up any other questions. How's that?
Okay, and then if we have minutes, I'm going to cover. I can cover a little bit of why retirement accounts have gotten so bad.
Okay. Well, why don't you do that? Why don't you do that first?
Okay, this is one of the things that I talk to my clients a lot. It has really a little to do with legal, but I want my clients to be aware of this. In when you think of retirement accounts like 401ks, IRAs, um, I think it's called Koenig accounts. This I'm not talking about pensions. I'm not talking about something that you have a payment, excuse me, a payment that comes in until you die and then it stops. I'm talking about money that has been saved in accounts. Um, in the good old days, when I left, and I'm just going to use an easy 500,000. If I had a $500,000 IRA or 401k, when I die, I could leave that 500,000 to my daughter. She actually could take minimum distributions from that money and and continue growing that money in investments over her lifetime. And by the time she died, that money might be 750,000 or a million, and she could leave it to her children. And the federal government realized that that wasn't the purpose they set retirement accounts up for 50 years ago. They set up the retirement accounts so that people could save money to live on when they retire, so they wouldn't have to be dependent on Social Security, but they didn't set it up to leave as an inheritance. So it started in 2013. There was a law that passed in 2013, 2017, and then the Secure Act of 2020. And now the government says if you leave that money as an inheritance, that your children have 10 years to liquidate it. They cannot extend it over their entire life. They have 10 years max to take that money out. So using that 500,000, my daughter would have to take 50,000 a year out minimum because it's still growing, with investments. 50,000 minimum a year out of that account over 10 years to liquidate it. Now that doesn't sound like a big deal, but let's say my daughter's making 150,000 a year on her regular job, or she and her husband or whatever. They're in a certain tax bracket at that amount. That 50,000 will take them to the next tax bracket. And so one of the tax brackets goes from 24%, I think, to 28%. And so if that money takes them to the next tax bracket, then the federal government taxes them at that higher rate for all of their money, not just what you left them. So it can really cause a serious tax burden on our children now because that money is added to their money and then they're taxed on all of their money at the higher tax rate. And so there are strategies that can be done to help that. But one of the strategies I tell my clients is you need to work with your financial advisor. And if your financial advisor doesn't seem to understand or know tax planning, you need to find one that does. Because you can take that money and you can start taking out more than you need, or you start taking it out before you need it, or before you're required to, because you're not required to take money out of a retirement account until 72 and a half, I think it is now. But you can start taking it out after 59 and paying a lower tax bracket for you. You're paying the tax on it and move that money into a different investment tool. And that way, when it's left to my children, they're not taxed on it. They get it tax free. They get 100% of it and they're not taxed on it versus a retirement account. So if anybody has more questions on that, I can answer them a little, but just start talking to your financial advisor. Now, I always tell people there's not very often that I can say I understand why the government did what they did. This one I do. I don't like it, but I understand why. Because the government was not getting their tax on this money. That money is deferred tax. And if I'm able to leave it to my child and she doesn't have to pay tax on it, and they're never getting their tax. And so the government says enough's enough. We need our taxes. And so that's why they did it. And because of the way they did it, it really causes a tax burden on our children.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run through the CEU stuff.
Okay.
You guys, for those of you that are joining us today for CEUs, we're providing complimentary CEUs for licensed social workers and licensed professional counselors in the state of Texas, as well as certificates of attendance. Please note, if you have a different license in Texas or you have a license outside of Texas, you're more than welcome to go through the process, get a certificate, submit it to your jurisdiction. But please note it's totally up to them whether they'll accept it or not. I've had people tell me that they've been able to use them before, and I've had jurisdictions reach out to me for more information on webinars we've done to decide whether they're going to accept somebody's submission. So, again, go ahead. You can go through the process, get one. There's just no guarantee that that they'll take it. Today's webinar is worth 1.5 hours of CEU credits. You must have attended the entire live webinar and the Q&A. We've got 5 more minutes. You must also complete the Google survey. Zoom should offer you the option to go to a survey as you close out today. If it doesn't, you'll get the don't worry, you'll get the link in the email, follow-up email that we got tomorrow. Please note, all of a sudden last week, Google changed their form format, and so I'm still trying to work out some kinks. So if you have some problems with the survey, please feel free to email me. For some reason, the first one I did, it made me approve everyone who asked to fill it out. I think I've got that fixed, but if it shows up, just go ahead and request access, and I'll give it to you as I'm trying to work through the change. I appreciate your patience with that. You will have until the 27th to complete the survey, and then give us about a month to get those surveys out to you. I'm a little bit farther behind than that right now, but usually we're at somewhere between 3 weeks and 4 weeks in getting those out. So so Fred, will you back it up one slide?
I sure will. Well, thought I was. There you go.
There you go. That's the slide we want. Okay. So the question, Dina asked did you answer my question? And we did, Dina, but you know what? I forgot what question you asked, and I can't get back to the oh, yes, I can, to the dismissed things. Dina, why don't you email me on that, and I'll get an answer. We did go through and answer it, and I'll go ahead and respond to your email. If you'll email me your question, that would be very helpful. What is a typical cost of a trust package?
Okay. Again, every attorney is different, but an attorney that knows what they're doing, you're going to pay a little bit more because, again, the documents are only as good as well they're written, and the better they're written, the more you're going to pay for them. That's the reality. But typically, a single trust can run anywhere from $2,500 to $6,500, $7,000, depending on what is needed in it. A marital trust can run from like $3,500 to $8,500. Now, the quote that I'm giving you is not just the trust, because most attorneys that do this do a complete package. And what I mean by that is you'll get the trust and all the supporting documents that go with the trust. You'll get a pour over will, which is a special will that goes with the trust. And then you'll get all the other documents like power of attorney, medical, everything that we've talked about in the presentation today. You should get that in a package deal. And that's typically what estate planning attorneys that do this, because I'm not comfortable just doing a trust for my clients if they don't have a power of attorney. So and vice versa. I don't want somebody to just come to me and say, hey, I need a power of attorney. Well, what else do you need? You really need a medical power of attorney too. So we do package deals. And so that flat fee that I quoted you is kind of the going rate for a package in that area. I did see one question I wanted to just grab while I'm looking at it. He said, how do we request Gene said, how do we request the lower tax rate once we're 59? It's not a matter of asking for the lower tax rate. It's a matter of taking advantage of the tax rate that you have. So for instance, let me just give you an example. In 2024, if you're married and filing jointly, you are at 22% if you make anywhere from $94,301 to $201,050. So let's say you're a married family filing jointly that makes $125,000. That means then you could go in and you could take out another $75,000 out of your IRA or 401k that year and pay the 22% because you're taking out money and you're not going over the next threshold. So you're taking out your basically the gap between what you make and what the next threshold is. You can take that money out and stay in 22%. You pay 22% on that 75,000, and then you move that 75,000 into another investment tool that'll start making 10, 15,000, percent, whatever. So it starts building back up again, tax free to your kids. So it's really taking advantage of the tax rates, and all you have to do to figure that out is one, talk to your accountant. But I just Googled 2024 tax rates, and it gives you a chart of what they are and what the maximum is before it goes up to the next level. And so that's the way you take advantage of it. I got the question, how much is a guardianship? Well, a guardianship falls into two categories. There's guardian of the person and guardian of the estate. A guardian of the person, and again, I'm referring to Texas. And for those of you, I don't know if we have very many outside of Texas today, but if you're outside of Texas, your state may call what we call a guardianship, they may call it a conservatorship, because conservatorship and guardianship are interchanged between states. But what we call a guardianship in Texas, a guardian of the person, is somebody being appointed to be the caretaker. I'm responsible for making sure my mom goes to the doctor, make sure she has a good place to live, make sure she gets fed, make sure she takes her medicine. I'm the guardian of the person for my mom, taking care of her. The guardian of the estate is the person responsible for the money. That's the person responsible for paying bills, collecting money, managing and taking care of the money. So if you have to do a guardian of the person and guardian of the estate, it gets a lot more expensive. Those again can run $10,000 to $15,000. Guardian of the estate is far more expensive than guardian of the person. I do guardians of the person for people that are special needs. So let's say you've got a child that's Down syndrome and that child turns 18. Now that child is not a child, it's an adult under law. So I will do a guardian of the person for the parents to be able to continue taking care of that special needs child. And you're looking at about $3,500, give or take, 2,500 to 3,500, I think it is. So it really depends on what needs to be done, but guardian of the estates are far more expensive.
Someone asked, what's the anticipated cost of a special needs trust? I work with a brain injury patient.
Okay, a lot of times it depends on whether we need to do what's called a standalone special needs trust, or what I often do is I build a special needs trust inside of my family's trust. So, for instance, I can have a trust that says, this is my trust during our life, but when I die, the money I'm giving to my special needs child goes into their special needs trust. So the special needs trust is written inside of my trust to spring into effect when I die. That's really common, and that increases the trust a couple thousand maybe within the drafting of the whole family trust. A standalone trust can run 4,500, 5,000, give or take, depending on what it is. I honestly don't do a lot of standalone trusts. I have a couple of attorneys I work with that do more. They specialize more in that, in special needs, and I send my clients over to them to do those standalone trusts.
Somebody asked, is a Roth IRA okay to leave to the kids, or is that also subject to the 10-year rule?
No, the big thing to look at is the money in the account, has it already been taxed? If it has already been taxed, and I'm when I use the term tax, I mean income tax. Has income tax been paid on the money that went into that account, or did the money go into that account prior to being taxed, and the tax is going to be taken out at the back end? Roth IRAs have been taxed. So Roth IRAs are not the same as traditional IRAs and 401ks.
Um, how do we? Here's the lower the you've already answered this one. The lower the tax rate. Um, I'm sorry. Somebody asked about CLEs. Today's webinar, there are not CLEs for today's webinar. Today's webinar did not qualify for CLEs. So that's why we didn't discuss them in the CEUs. I'm sorry. Um, let me go through here. Um, what do you do if you aren't married and do not have a great relationship? This is Dana's question. I'm gonna have Dana. Will you please email that to me and I'll get a question email back to you. We did already go through that. Somebody asked, is the webinar going to be recorded? Yes, we're recording it. I'm quite a ways behind. We're having a problem with the recordings, and so um, but it is being recorded and it will get up there. Um,
I think we're about done, Marty.
yeah, I do too.
Like I said, you all have Marty's information. You have my information. If we can answer any questions whatsoever, if Marty gets them and he forwards them over to me. So I'll be more than happy to help anybody outside of this meeting if you need it. I love doing these presentations for Marty because I do get a lot of calls and a lot of questions. And I'll be honest, I've kind of got a different way of running my practice. I believe that God's going to give me the clients he wants me to have and the income he wants me to have, but my job is to help. And I love being able to get on a phone with somebody that's desperate because they've got a situation that they can't understand and they don't know what to do. And I can talk them through it and help them. So if you're in that situation, please take advantage of this relationship now. And I'll be more than happy to help anybody we possibly can help.
And once again, Fred's contact information will be in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow as well. So, Fred, thank you so very much. Uh, please share with Sheila. We hope she gets feeling better quick, and she's ready for what she's got going on this weekend. But thank you so much for doing this for us. We sincerely appreciate it, and thank you all for joining us.
And Marty, I hope you and your daughter have a great time watching the Notre Dame game this weekend.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. God bless you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.